Hi there, and welcome to my channel. If you would please hit the subscribe button on your way in, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you like what you see, hit the like. It's free and it helps get me out in that algorithm. Alright, let's get on to today's topic. Today we're going to be discussing a man named Samuel Little, who was deemed by the FBI as America's most prolific serial killer, going on a 40-year spree before he was caught. Samuel Little was caught and arrested on September 5th, 2012, at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky. He was initially arrested on an outstanding narcotics possession warrant from California. While in custody, authorities used DNA evidence to link him to 3 unsolved murders in Los Angeles from the late 1980s. This led to his conviction in 2014 and subsequent confessions to 90 additional murders across the United States. This man had like a photographic memory, and remembered all of his victims and sketched and painted many portraits of them. And I'm going to be featuring them today as I read the story of Samuel Little. But first, let's listen to a clip of him, and you'll see the detail that he remembers, and it's chilling. So, here we go.
A black male dressed up as a female. Okay, how tall is she?
Marianne's about 5'7", so 5'6". She weighed about 135.
Okay.
Maybe 140.
And how old do you think she was?
But she was 19.
Okay.
Now, as I read the story of Samuel Little and his victims, again, I am going to be showing shots of some of his drawings that he drew of these victims. Now, some of them were connected to crimes, and some of them weren't. Doesn't mean he didn't do them, though. It just means they didn't find this woman. She wasn't missing. As in most cases, the women that he murdered were women that not many people were looking for or cared about, unfortunately. So a lot of these became unsolved. So let's get on with the story of Samuel Little and his victims. Samuel Little, born June 7th, 1940, was an American serial killer who was convicted of 8 murders and confessed to committing 93 murders between 1970 and 2005. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program has confirmed his involvement in at least 60 murders, the largest number of confirmed victims for any serial killer in American history. Little provided sketches for 26 of his victims, although not all have been linked to known murders. His crime spree stretched across the country, from Miami to Los Angeles. Little was born in Reynolds, Georgia. The census from the year Little was born said his mother, Bessie May, worked as a maid, and that his father was a 19-year-old Paul McDowell. Little said that his teenaged mother was a lady of the night, and that she abandoned him as an infant. Soon after his birth, Little's family moved to Lorain, Ohio, where he was brought up mainly by his grandmother. He attended Hawthorne Junior High School. By his own account, he began having fantasies about strangling women as a child, starting when he saw his kindergarten teacher touch her neck. As a teenager, he collected true crime magazines depicting the strangulation of women. In 1956, after being convicted of breaking and entering into property in Omaha, Nebraska, Little was held in an institution for juvenile offenders. His mother was listed on the booking card as whereabouts unknown. Little moved to Florida to live with his mother in the late 1960s. By his own account, he was working at various times as a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant. He said he then began traveling more widely and had more run-ins with the law, being arrested in 8 states for crimes that included driving under the influence, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and rape. Little took up boxing during his time in prison, referring to himself as a former prize fighter. In 1961, Little was sentenced to 3 years in prison for breaking into a furniture store in Lorraine. He was released in 1964. By 1975, he had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes including theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and attacks on government officials. In 1982, Little was arrested in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and he faced charges for the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose Lepre, who had gone missing in September of that year. A grand jury declined to indict him for her murder. However, while under investigation, Little was extradited to Florida and tried for the murder of 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount, whose body had been found in September 1982. Prosecution witnesses identified Little in court as a person who had spent time with Mount on the night before her disappearance. Due to mistrust of witness testimonies, Little was acquitted in January 1984. Little moved to California, where he stayed in the vicinity of San Diego. In October 1984, he was arrested for kidnapping, beating, and strangling 22-year-old Lori Barros, who survived. 1 month later, he was found by police in the back seat of his car with an unconscious woman, also beaten and strangled, in the same location as the attempted murder of Barros. Little served 2.5 years in prison for both crimes. Upon his release in February 1987, he immediately moved to Los Angeles and committed at least 10 more additional murders. Little was arrested on September 5, 2012, at Wayside Christian Homeless Shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and extradited to California to face a narcotics charge, after which authorities used DNA testing to establish that he was involved in the murders of Linda Alford, killed on July 13, 1987, Audrey Nelson Everett, killed on August 14, 1989, and Guadalupe Duarte Apodaca, killed on September 3, 1989. All three women were killed and later found on the streets of Los Angeles. He was extradited to Los Angeles, where he was charged on January 7, 2013. A few months later, the police said that Little was being investigated for the involvement in 36 murders committed in the 1980s, which until then had been undisclosed. In connection with the new circumstances in Mississippi, the Lepre murder case was reopened. In total, Little tested for involvement in the 93 murders of women in many states. Little was tried for the murders of Alfred Nelson and Apodaca in September 2014. The prosecution presented the DNA evidence as well as testimony of the witnesses who were attacked by the accused at different times throughout his criminal career. On September 25, 2014, Little was found guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On the day of the verdict, Little continued to insist on his innocence. Before his death, Little was serving a sentence at California State Prison in Los Angeles County. On November 9, 2018, Little confessed to the 1996 fatal strangulation of Melissa Thomas. On November 13, 2018, Little was charged with the 1994 murder of Denise Christie Brothers in Odessa, Texas, after having confessed the crime to a Texas Ranger in May of 2018. Little pleaded guilty to the murder of Brothers on December 13th and received another life sentence. The Ector County, Texas District Attorney and Wise County, Texas Sheriff's Office announced on November 13th that Little had confessed to dozens of murders and may have committed more than 90 across 14 states between 1970 and 2005. On November 15, 2018, Russell County, Alabama District Attorney announced that Little had earlier that month confessed to the 1979 murder of 23-year-old Brenda Alexander, whose body was found in Phoenix City, Alabama. On November 16, 2018, Macon, Georgia sheriffs announced that Little had credibly confessed to the 1977 strangulation murder of an unidentified woman and the 1992 strangling murder of an 18-year-old Fredonia Smith. In the fall of 2018, Little confessed to the 1982 murder of 55-year-old Dorothy Richards and 1996 murder of 40-year-old Daisy McGuire. Both of their bodies were found in Houma, Louisiana. On November 19, 2018, Harrison County, Mississippi, Sheriff Troy Peterson said that Little had confessed to strangling 36-year-old Julia Critchfield in the Gulfport area in 1978 and dumping her body off of a cliff. On November 20th, 2018, Lee County, Mississippi law enforcement officials announced that Little had admitted to killing 46-year-old Nancy Carol Stevens in Tupelo, Mississippi. In 2005, and that the case would be presented to a grand jury in January 2019. On November 21st, 2018, Richland County, South Carolina, authorities announced that Little had confessed to murdering 19-year-old Evelyn Weston, whose body was found near Fort Jackson, South Carolina in 1978. Little confessed to having killed 20-year-old Rosie Hill in Marion County, Florida in 1982. On November 27, 2018, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced that a violent crime apprehension program team had confirmed 34 of Little's confessions and was working to match the remainder of Little's confessions to known murders or suspicious deaths. Little began making the confessions in exchange for a transfer out of Los Angeles County Prison in which he was being held. One included his confession to a previous cold case homicide in Prince George County, Maryland, previously one of only 2 homicide cases in that county with unidentified victims. In December 2018, Little was indicted for strangling Linda Sue Boards, 23, to death in May 1981 in Warren County, Kentucky. Her body was found on May 15, 1981, near U.S. Route 68. One of the Little's victims was identified as in December 2018 as Martha Cunningham of Knox County, Texas, who was 34 when Little murdered her in 1975. On May 31, 2019, Cuyahoga County, Ohio prosecutors announced indictments with 4 counts of aggravated murder and 6 counts of kidnapping that accused Little of killing Mary Jo Payton in 1984 and Rose Evans in 1991 in Cleveland. Both victims were strangled and dumped. The body of Rose Evans, 32, was found on August 24, 1991 in a vacant lot on East 39th Street. She left her hometown of Binghamton, New York, when she was 17. Evans had been strangled, according to coroner Elizabeth Balraj. As for Payton, an anthropologist had to create a model of what she looked like, but she remained unidentified until 1992, when Cleveland put her thumbprint in an FBI database and got a match. Little picked up Payton at a bar near East 105th and Euclid Avenues. He described her as a short, plump woman in her early 20s with brown hair. Little confessed to killing another Cleveland woman in 1977 or 78. The woman murdered in 1977 or 78 was found on March 18, 1983 in Willoughby Hills, Ohio, according to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. She was likely black and somewhere between 17 and 35. The woman's body had been dumped down a grassy slope near a fence in a wooded area just off Interstate 271. When her body was found by a man walking his dog, only her skeleton, some clothing, and jewelry remained. Little confessed to killing 1 woman in Akron, Ohio, 2 in Cincinnati. One of the bodies had been dumped outside Columbus, Ohio, and 1 woman he met in Columbus and disposed of in Kentucky. Of the 2 women Little murdered in Cincinnati, one was identified as Anna Stewart, 33, whose body was dumped in Grove City, Ohio. Stewart was last seen on October 6, 1981, getting out of a cab at a general hospital to see her sister in the hospital, now University of Cincinnati Academic Health Center. He killed the other woman, or she was killed on October 11th. He killed the other woman between 1980 and 1999. The Jane Doe was anywhere from 15 to 50, as the details of her age and the date of her murder are unclear. She was black, slender, wore glasses, and lived in the Over the Rhine neighborhood of Cincinnati, with a heavy female Hispanic. Little left her body beside a cigarette billboard in Ohio. On June 7, 2019, Little was indicted in Hamilton County, Ohio, for murdering the 2 women killed in Cincinnati. Little had drawn portraits of many women he killed. These portraits were released by the FBI in hopes of someone identifying the women. At least 1 portrait solved a cold case in Akron, Ohio. In November 2020, Little confessed to 2 Florida murders, one of which another man had been wrongfully convicted. On April 22, 2022, a woman, Little, killed in Memphis, Tennessee, whose body was found on the Arkansas side of the Mississippi River. In 1990, was identified as 30-year-old Zena Marie Jones. Little admitted to 93 different murders in total, and 60 deaths have been formally connected to him by the police. The majority of Little's victims were prostitutes, substance abusers, or homeless individuals, and most of them were female. He claimed that he had thought that these persons would leave fewer clues for authorities to find and leave fewer people to search for them. Despite the broad scope of his offending, Little was charged with and convicted of only 8 murders in total, and as these cases had the strongest evidence of guilt. Little died on December 30th, 2020 in Los Angeles County Area Hospital. Although California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation sources indicate no cause of death, Little suffered from diabetes, heart problems, and other health conditions. Jillian Lauren investigated Little and interviewed him at length in prison. Lauren initially had begun writing a mystery novel, and while interviewing Detective Mitzi Roberts of LA Police Department, she told Lauren, "Well, I'm proud of them all, but I did catch the serial killer Sam Little once. That was pretty cool." After that, Lauren switched from writing crime fiction to writing a nonfiction book about Little, and in her course of preparation spent more than 40 hours interviewing him. During the interviews, he confessed to multiple murders and sent her drawings of his victims. In December 2018, Lauren wrote about her experience interviewing Little for The Cut. Joel Berlinger read the articles and thought that it would be interesting for a feature-length film or documentary series and met with Lauren. The 5-part television miniseries Confronting a Serial Killer was directed and produced by Berlinger, presents her investigation, and premiered on April 18th, 2021 on Starz. In 2023, Lauren's book Behold the Monster, Confronting America's Most Prolific Serial Killer and Uncovering the Woman Society Forgot, was published by Source Books. And that is the story of Samuel Little and his 40-year crime spree. If you liked what you heard today, please hit the thumbs up and hit that subscribe for me. And I will catch you on the next one. Peace, love, and claws, y'all.